A man stands at the open rear staircase of a jetliner. Wind screaming past, lightning splitting the night sky. His calm, too calm, clutching a bag stuffed with stolen cash, his tie whipping in the storm. In the next heartbeat, he'll step into the darkness, vanishing forever. Who was this man? And why did he risk everything to leap into a storm that should have killed him? Tonight, we revisit the chilling night DB Cooper disappeared into legend and uncover the secrets that may finally explain what really happened. The rain beat down on the tarmac at Portland International Airport. Inside the terminal, no one noticed the quiet man in a dark suit, a black tie, and a neatly pressed white shirt. He carried nothing but a slim briefcase. By the time the sun set that Thanksgiving Eve of 1971, this man would vanish into legend, walking onto a plane as a passenger and disappearing forever as the world's most famous fugitive. But who was he really? And how did he manage to pull off the only unsolved skyjacking in American history? Tonight, we take you inside the mystery of DB Cooper, a man who rewrote the rules of crime, and whose secret may still be hidden somewhere in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The story begins with Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short hop from Portland to Seattle. It was supposed to be a routine 30-minute flight, a commuter trip on the eve of Thanksgiving, filled with business travelers, a few families, and tired flight attendants just hoping for a quiet night. Among them was Florence Schaffner, a young flight attendant with kind eyes and a calm manner that reassured nervous flyers. She had worked dozens of flights like this before. Nothing seemed unusual. The Boeing 727 sat low and sleek on the wet runway, its engines humming, the smell of jet fuel mixing with the scent of rain-soaked pavement. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, and the air carried the faint aroma of coffee from the galley. And then, he boarded. The man purchased his ticket with cash, just $20 for a one-way trip. He wrote his name as Dan Cooper. The gate agent barely glanced at him. He looked like any other businessman. Mid-40s, calm, polite, carrying himself with quiet confidence. Once seated in the last row of the cabin, Cooper ordered a bourbon and soda. He smoked a cigarette, exhaling slowly as though he had all the time in the world. But then, midway through the flight, he handed Florence Schaffner a folded note. She assumed it was just another lonely businessman's phone number. She slipped it unopened into her pocket. That's when he leaned toward her and whispered, his voice calm, almost casual. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence's hand trembled as she unfolded the paper. Written in neat block letters, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." Her pulse quickened, but Cooper's demeanor remained steady, almost gentle. He cracked open his briefcase, revealing a glimpse of red sticks, wires, and a battery. He wasn't bluffing. "Tell the captain," he said evenly. "I want $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle." Florence carried the message to the cockpit, her voice shaking. The pilots exchanged tense looks, sweat glistening under the dim cockpit lights. They had no choice but to comply. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, passengers noticed nothing strange. Cooper lit another cigarette, calmly sipping his bourbon, occasionally glancing at his watch. His patience was unnerving. As the plane descended towards Seattle, Florence noticed something odd. Cooper always kept his back straight, his eyes sharp, like a man trained to command. He never wasted words. And when he gave instructions, they weren't random. He knew the Boeing 727 had a rear staircase, a detail almost no civilian would know. He even requested the plane be flown under specific conditions. Landing gear down, flaps at 15 degrees, airspeed no more than 200 knots. It was as if he had rehearsed this moment for years. Seattle police and FBI agents scrambled to gather the ransom. Stacks of worn $20 bills stuffed into a canvas bag. When the plane landed, the money and parachutes were delivered. Cooper released the passengers, but kept the flight attendants and pilots on board. His plan wasn't over. At 7:40 p.m., the 727 took off again into the stormy night sky, heading south toward Mexico City, as Cooper had instructed. But somewhere over the dark forests of Washington, he made his move. He ordered the flight crew into the cockpit. Then he lowered the rear staircase of the 727, the first time anyone had ever used it mid-flight. And then, carrying the ransom strapped to his body, Cooper stepped into the freezing November rain and jumped. In that moment, the impossible became reality. A man had hijacked a commercial airliner, extorted $200,000, and escaped into the night, leaving no trace behind. The crew heard the rush of wind, felt the plane lurch upward as the weight left the aircraft. But when the FBI scoured the forests below, searching with helicopters, dogs, and soldiers, there was nothing. No parachute, no body, no Cooper. It was as if the storm had swallowed him whole. In the days that followed, the FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. They questioned suspects, tracked serial numbers on the ransom bills, and chased hundreds of leads. The nation became obsessed. Who was this man in the suit? A military paratrooper? A disgruntled airline worker? A ghost? Florence Schaffner, haunted by his calm stare, told investigators, he seemed like a man who knew he was never coming back. Each lead led to a dead end. One suspect was ruled out by fingerprints. Another had airtight alibis. Every trail faded into the mist. But then, 9 years later, in 1980, a young boy digging near the Columbia River unearthed a rotting bundle of $20 bills. Serial numbers confirmed it was Cooper's ransom money. The discovery reignited the mystery. Had he died in the jump? Or had he lived and planted the money as a decoy? 9 years after the skyjacking, a boy digging in the sand along the Columbia River found something strange. Bundles of decayed $20 bills, matching the ransom serial numbers, buried in the dirt like a time capsule. But here's the problem. The location didn't match Cooper's supposed flight path, which meant either Cooper died in the wilderness, or someone carefully planted the money there. And the more investigators searched, the more they realized this wasn't just a hijacking. It was a puzzle built to mislead. The FBI interviewed hundreds of people, but a few names refused to disappear from the files. There was Richard Floyd McCoy, a Vietnam veteran and helicopter pilot. Just months after Cooper's escape, McCoy pulled off an eerily similar hijacking, parachuting out of a Boeing 727 with $500,000 in ransom. He was caught, imprisoned, and later killed in a shootout after escaping prison. Many believed he was Cooper, but the stewardesses from Flight 305 swore McCoy looked nothing like the calm man in the black suit. Then there was Dwayne Webber. On his deathbed in 1995, he confessed to his wife, "I am Dan Cooper." She later found a diary with cryptic references to the hijacking and scars on his body that looked like parachute burns. But handwriting tests were inconclusive. Another suspect, Kenneth Christensen, a quiet Northwest Airlines flight attendant. He'd been stationed near military parachute bases and suddenly bought a house with cash after 1971. His family swore he had the personality of Cooper, reserved, polite, but carrying secrets. And yet, none of the evidence was conclusive. Cooper seemed to hover between them all, like a ghost that could wear many faces. What really fueled the mystery were the contradictions. The ransom bills found in 1980 were discovered miles away from the projected jump zone. They weren't scattered by wind or rain. They were stacked neatly, as though buried intentionally. Even stranger, Cooper's demands showed an uncanny knowledge of aviation. He knew the Boeing 727's rear staircase could be lowered in flight, a detail almost no civilian knew at the time. He insisted the pilots fly below 10,000 feet and at low speed, a maneuver used in military parachute training. And yet, he made rookie mistakes too. He jumped into freezing rain, wearing a business suit and loafers. He had no helmet. The parachute he selected was a training chute, one without steering capabilities. So who was he? A professional? Or a desperate amateur who got lucky? Investigators began to notice something chilling. Cooper may not have been working alone. The parachutes he requested, for instead of one, suggested he wanted authorities to think he might force a hostage to jump with him. It bought him leverage, ensuring they gave him real parachutes instead of sabotaged ones. But why for? Did he plan for an accomplice? Did someone wait for him on the ground? Years later, whispers emerged of a strange car seen on backroads near the suspected drop zone that stormy night. Its driver? Never identified. One former FBI agent claimed that within the files lay a pattern, that every time investigators got close to Cooper, someone quietly steered them away. Either we were chasing a man who was smarter than all of us, he said, or we were chasing someone the government didn't want us to find. The most disturbing clue? The alias he used, Dan Cooper. Comic book fans noticed immediately. In Europe, there was a French-language comic series about a Canadian fighter pilot named Dan Cooper, a hero who specialized in parachute jumps. These comics were never published in the United States. So how did an American hijacker know the name? Unless he wasn't American at all. As theories swirled, one chilling idea began to gain traction. What if Cooper didn't survive the jump? Some FBI agents argued the conditions were impossible. The freezing wind, the dense forests, the pitch-black night. They believed Cooper's body was still out there, buried beneath decades of moss and leaves. But others weren't so sure. Because in the years after the hijacking, ransom bills matching Cooper's money began surfacing, not in the wilderness, but in circulation, quietly used at banks and gas stations across the country. If Cooper had died, who was spending his money? The FBI doubled down, focusing on suspects with military backgrounds, men who knew parachutes, aircraft, and survival. McCoy, Weber, Christensen. But each time, something didn't add up. One night, an agent who had worked the case since day one told a reporter, "I've looked into the eyes of killers, liars, thieves. But Cooper? The way witnesses described him? Calm, respectful, even polite. He didn't fit any profile. It's like he wasn't doing this for money. He was doing it for something else." And that, more than anything, terrified investigators. To this day, no one knows whether D.B. Cooper lived or died. His legend has become bigger than the crime itself, a folk hero to some, a criminal mastermind to others. But buried deep in declassified files is a witness statement almost no one talks about. A statement from someone who claimed to have seen a man, soaking wet, shivering, and carrying something heavy, walking along a lonely road hours after the jump. The FBI dismissed it, said it was unreliable. But what if it wasn't? The official story says Cooper jumped into the storm and disappeared. The FBI closed the case in 2016, declaring him likely dead. But buried in dusty case files and half-forgotten witness statements lies another story. One that suggests Cooper may have walked away from that jump, very much alive. And if that's true, then the real mystery isn't how he disappeared. It's where he went next. Just hours after Cooper leapt from Flight 305, a truck driver near a remote highway swore he saw something strange. A man, drenched, limping, and clutching what looked like a sack, stumbling in the rain along the road. The description matched Cooper exactly. Dark suit, tie loosened, hair matted by water. The man waved frantically at the truck, but the driver, uneasy, sped away. Later, when the FBI asked why he didn't stop, he said something about him didn't feel right. Like he wasn't supposed to be there. The FBI dismissed the account as unreliable, but locals would whisper for decades that a stranger had passed through their town that night. Other strange sightings began to emerge. A woman living on the edge of the forest reported hearing what she thought was a low, dragging voice calling out in the storm. When she looked outside, she swore she saw a man's shadow moving between the trees. Another man claimed he found scraps of fabric near his hunting cabin weeks later, dark cloth, torn and mudded, with what looked like burn marks. Every time these accounts surfaced, the FBI shut them down. Too vague, too unprovable, too messy. But to those who believed Cooper survived, the message was clear. He didn't vanish into the woods. He walked out of them. One overlooked clue deepened the mystery further. Inside the plane, after the jump, investigators found Cooper's black tie clipped neatly to the seat. But under microscopic examination years later, particles of titanium were discovered on it, a rare industrial substance used in specialized manufacturing during the 1960s. It meant Cooper may have worked in a factory or aerospace setting. He wasn't just a random man in a suit. He had ties to industries connected with secrecy, military contracts, even classified government work. And if that's true, then maybe Cooper didn't choose that plane at random. Maybe it was part of something bigger. In the early 2000s, a private researcher uncovered an internal memo in FBI archives. It mentioned a local eyewitness who had positively identified a man resembling Cooper visiting a small-town airfield weeks after the hijacking. The memo ended abruptly, with no follow-up. The lead had been dropped. Why? Was it incompetence? Or was someone making sure the trail went cold? Then came the most haunting revelation of all. A retired law enforcement officer admitted in an interview that, in the mid-1970s, a quiet stranger began frequenting a diner near his rural town. He paid only in cash, always $20 bills, many of them old series notes. He never gave his full name. And then one day, he vanished, leaving behind a single clue. A napkin with a crude drawing of a parachute and the initials DC scribbled at the bottom. The officer kept it locked away for decades. If true, this would mean Cooper not only survived, he was hiding in plain sight. As theories piled up, one question began to eat at investigators. Was Cooper a lone wolf, or part of something larger? The strange choice of parachute, the military precision of his instructions, the buried ransom money years later, these weren't random. They felt like moves in a game only Cooper knew he was playing. And if he was still alive, still out there, what else had he done in the shadows while the world was busy chasing ghosts? To this day, no suspect has ever been definitively proven to be Cooper. But the eyewitness accounts, the titanium on the tie, and the mysterious cache that surfaced all point to one possibility. He walked away, free. But free men make mistakes. And somewhere, buried in the timeline, Cooper may have slipped. Because as new researchers dig into the case, they've uncovered a chilling thread. One that ties Cooper not to the forests of Washington, but to crimes and names no one ever connected before. And in this, we'll follow that thread to discover that the man we call D.B. Cooper might not have vanished at all. He might have reinvented himself under a new identity that will leave you stunned. He was quiet, polite, a man who blended in everywhere, and yet always seemed to be carrying secrets. After the hijacking, he bought a modest house with cash. He lived simply. He avoided attention. His name was Kenneth Christensen, and some believe he was the man who jumped into the storm. Christensen had been a flight attendant for Northwest Orient Airlines, the very airline Cooper hijacked. He knew the Boeing 727 inside and out. He had access to the flight paths, the crew, and the technical details Cooper used in his demands. After the hijacking, Christensen's life changed quietly but dramatically. He purchased a house with stacks of cash despite a modest salary. He started wearing suits more often, and according to his family, he began drinking heavily, almost as if he was hiding a burden too heavy to carry. His brother swore that on his deathbed, Christensen muttered something chilling. "There's something you should know about 1971. But he never finished the sentence. Investigators who studied Christensen noted uncanny parallels. Witnesses from Flight 305 described Cooper as polite, calm, soft-spoken, exactly how Christensen's co-workers described him. They said he never raised his voice, never panicked, and always carried himself with quiet authority. One stewardess even admitted in later years that, looking at Christensen's photo, she felt a shiver. It could have been him. But there was a problem. Christensen was shorter than Cooper was reported to be. Some FBI files listed Cooper as around 6 feet tall. Christensen was barely 5 feet 8 inches. Was it just a bad witness estimate in the chaos of the night? Or proof Christensen was innocent? A strange detail added fuel to the theory. When Cooper handed his note to the stewardess, he chose block lettering, perfectly neat, perfectly straight. Years later, analysts compared it to Christensen's handwriting. The resemblance was uncanny. And then there was the tie. The black clip-on tie Cooper left behind. Christensen wore that exact brand, that exact style, every day at work. Coincidence? Or confession in plain sight? In 2003, a private investigator named Skip Portis began digging into Christensen. He interviewed neighbors, co-workers, and family. The more he found, the more convinced he became. "Everything lines up," he said. "The money, the knowledge of aircraft, the demeanor, the timing. If it wasn't Christensen, then it was someone who lived his exact same life." But the FBI remained unconvinced. No fingerprints matched. No DNA could confirm it. The official record still said, "Not enough evidence." Yet one haunting discovery kept the Christensen theory alive. A family member recalled a night when Kenneth had too much to drink. His hands shook. His eyes grew glassy. He slammed a fist on the table and whispered, "I did something once, something nobody will ever forget." And then he walked away, refusing to say another word. So was Kenneth Christensen truly Cooper? If he was, then he had pulled off the most legendary escape in American history, only to live out his years in quiet obscurity. No yachts, no riches, no lavish life. Just a modest home, a dark secret, and an unshakable shadow following him until his death. But if he wasn't Cooper, then the real hijacker was still out there, watching as another man's name took the blame. The truth seemed ready to slip away forever. Christensen was dead. The evidence was circumstantial, and the FBI had already closed the case. But then, a researcher stumbled upon something in the archives. Something overlooked. A single name buried in a forgotten report. A man with military training. A man with aviation ties. A man who had lived only miles from the suspected drop zone. A man the FBI questioned once, and never again. The Christensen theory may be compelling. But what if the real Cooper was someone else entirely? Someone investigators let walk away 50 years ago? In Part 5, we'll uncover that name, and the chilling reason the FBI may have looked the other way. For 50 years, the question has haunted investigators, amateur sleuths, and storytellers alike. Who was D.B. Cooper? We've followed the suspects, the theories, and the strange clues scattered like breadcrumbs across the decades. Some believe he died in the jump. Others believe he lived quietly among us, hiding in plain sight. But what if the truth was buried in the FBI files all along? A name overlooked, a lead forgotten? And even more importantly, what can Cooper's story teach us about our own lives, our choices, and the shadows we carry? In a little-known report from the early 1970s, the FBI interviewed a man named William J. Smith. He was a former paratrooper, a railroad worker, and someone with close ties to the very region where Cooper disappeared. Smith fit many of the details. He had parachute training. He had reasons to be disgruntled with large corporations after friends of his lost pensions when companies collapsed. He was quiet, disciplined, and lived in Washington state, not far from the suspected landing zone. But for reasons never explained, the FBI never pursued him seriously. He vanished from the files, forgotten as the spotlight turned to more flamboyant suspects. Decades later, when researchers revisited Smith's story, many found it hauntingly plausible. He wasn't looking for fame or luxury. He might have been looking for justice or revenge. The more we look at suspects like Smith, Christensen, or McCoy, the more contradictions we find. Each man fits part of the puzzle, but never the whole picture. The ransom money buried on the Columbia River, the titanium particles on the tie, the 4 parachutes, the mysterious sightings of a drenched man limping along backroads that night. Every clue seems to point in one direction, until it suddenly points somewhere else. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe Cooper didn't just vanish into the storm. Maybe he became the storm, scattering fragments of truth that will never be pieced together. One former agent admitted something chilling. If we ever knew who Cooper was, we might not like the answer, because it wouldn't be about adventure or cleverness. It would be about what desperation can make a man do. And that's the heart of it. D.B. Cooper was not just a mystery man in a suit. He was a reflection of something human, a desire for control in a world that feels uncontrollable, a desperate act that became legend. The truth? We may never know his real name. The FBI closed the case in 2016. DNA evidence was inconclusive. The ransom bills stopped appearing. And yet, the legend of Cooper endures. He has become more than a man. He has become a story, a symbol of mystery, defiance, and the shadow side of human ambition. The confrontation now isn't between Cooper and the FBI. It's between the myth and the truth. Was he a hero? A villain? A ghost? Or just a man who made one reckless choice and got lucky? The answer depends on how we choose to see him. And in that choice, we see ourselves. Cooper's leap into the storm remains America's only unsolved hijacking. He has become folklore, whispered about in bars, classrooms, and internet forums. But here's what matters more than his identity: the lessons his story leaves behind. Here are valuable life lessons as regarding the event. 1. Every choice leaves a trail. Cooper may have escaped that night, but half a century later, we are still chasing his shadow. In our own lives, our actions, honest or dishonest, echo far longer than we imagine. 2. Greed is never satisfied. Cooper asked for $200,000, a fortune in 1971. But if he lived quietly, burdened by fear. Wealth without peace is just another kind of prison. 3. Courage without wisdom becomes recklessness. Jumping from a plane in a storm may sound bold, but boldness without foresight can destroy us. True courage is choosing integrity even when no one is watching. 4. The truth always surfaces. Whether through money washing up on a riverbank or secrets whispered on a deathbed, hidden things rarely stay hidden forever. Character is what you do when no one is looking. J.C. Watts. The secret of happiness is freedom, and the secret of freedom is courage. Thucydides. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Epictetus. It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation, and only one bad one to lose it. Oh, Benjamin Franklin. D.B. Cooper may remain a mystery forever. But maybe that's the point. His story isn't just about a man who vanished into the night. It's about us, the choices we make, the lives we live, and the shadows we leave behind. Because in the end, the greatest heist isn't stealing money. It's stealing a life worth remembering. What do you think happened to D.B. Cooper? Did he die in the storm? Or did he walk among us, hidden in plain sight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and join us for another story on this channel, where we uncover the mysteries, crimes, and hidden truths that shape our world.
Some cases find justice, others are left in silence. But together, we can keep their stories alive. If you felt the weight of this mystery, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell, so you'll always be here when the next truth surfaces. Every voice matters. Every story counts. Step closer, behind the crime,